The chapter 1, titled as Sanya Darshan, is like an introduction for the rest of the Bhagavad Gita. Notably, Bhagavad Gita begins with Dhritarashtra Vacha, where Dhrit means determined or attached, and Rashtra means country or nation, which means one who is very attached to rule over a kingdom is called as Dhritarashtra. It was his obstinacy and deep-rooted material aspirations that led to the great fratricidal war at Kurukshetra. He acted like a mafia don who gets things done behind the scene, and his son Duryodhan was his puppet. And their aim was to usurp the kingdom and kingship that belonged to Pandavas and Yudhishthira Maharaj. Several attempts were made to resolve the conflict between brothers peacefully. But when Duryodhan and his team did not agree for any peace proposal, then finally Pandavas had to declare war to protect and defend their rights. The armies of Pandavas and Kauravas had assembled to fight with each other, and it was at this time Dhritarashtra, while sitting in his palace at Hastinapur, inquired from Sanjaya about the scene of battlefield and spoke as follows: O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do? And Sanjaya responded by describing Duryodhan's actions first at the battlefield, and then he described the Pandavas' army. Why did Sanjaya choose to speak first about Duryodhan's actions? The reason is, Dhritarashtra was afraid that under the influence of the place of pilgrimage, his sons may make some compromise. Thus Sanjaya wanted to console and convince Dhritarashtra that his sons cannot be changed. Just like you had been physically blind since birth, your sons are blinded by greed, envy, and material desires. And this is how Bhagavad Gita begins. To help you understand and remember the subject matter, we'll give an acronym for each chapter and then discuss it. The acronym for first chapter is Doubt, where D stands for Dhritarashtra and Duryodhan, from verse 1 to 12. In this set of verses, Duryodhan's actions are described, which reveals his diplomacy and inner fear. But why was he fearful? He had far bigger army than the Pandavas. He had many great warriors who could not be defeated or killed by anyone. And yet, he was fearful? We can learn two important lessons from this. Lesson 1. Material security and resources does not guarantee success and fearlessness. For example, Duryodhan had both, yet he was fearful, and he lost the battle. It is often seen that people who have more wealth, more possessions, to that degree, they are more fearful. So what makes us fearless? It is a subject matter worth pondering. Lesson 2. When the individual becomes self-centered, egoistic, and is primarily interested in selfish gain and personal aggrandizement, then fear, anxiety, and disappointment are inevitable. Unfortunately, such an individual becomes oblivious to the ill effects of his actions. For example, Duryodhan, for his greed, he was willing to destroy the lives and families of millions of warriors who had assembled to fight in the war. Although he had an option to accept the peace treaty proposed by Lord Krishna, but he was not willing to give even 5 villages to Pandavas. Thus, the great battle took place, and millions of soldiers and warriors lost their life, and to that much degree, number of families got destroyed. We have seen it in our recent history, how one man led the world into a second world war for his own vested interests and destroyed millions of lives. Thus, after describing Duryodhan's actions, Sanjaya described about Pandavas in verses 13 to 20, and it is titled as Ominous Result. In this set of verses, Sanjaya tactfully informs Dhritarashtra about his hopeless plans to win by describing different signs of victory. The key message from this section is Lord Krishna's protection is guaranteed to his surrendered devotees, regardless of whether the worldly odds seem stacked against the devotee. In other words, Those who stand on the side of purity and righteousness are always victorious. Thus, Pandavas, unlike Kauravas, were fearless. And this section brings out an important lesson for us. Lesson 1. Our faith on Krishna determines our degree of fearlessness. To give you an example, before the battle of Kurukshetra, both Duryodhana and Arjuna had approached Krishna to seek his favor. At that point of time, Krishna announced that he will not fight in the war, and each one of them can choose either between Krishna or his Narayani Sena. And Arjuna was given the first opportunity to choose. Arjuna, without thinking twice, immediately said, I would choose Krishna. And Krishna was surprised and he asked Arjuna, why did he choose me? And Arjuna confidently said, nothing else matters to me more than you. Your presence alone is sufficient for us to be victorious. However, Duryodhana laughed off at the decision of Arjuna, considering him to be sentimental, and very happily accepted Narayani Sena. He got Narayani Sena, yet he was fearful, while Pandavas were fearless due to their strong faith in Krishna. Moving on to the next section, 21 to 27, titled as Uncertainty. Sanjay speaks that Arjuna, out of curiosity, ordered Krishna and asked him to drive to the middle of the battlefield because he wanted to take a final look at the armies. Interestingly, Bhagavad Gita introduces the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, the controller, proprietor of everything, as a charioteer of Arjuna, who humbly carried out the orders of his devotee. And as dictated, the Lord drove Arjuna's chariot in front of Bhishma and Drona. And seeing all his relatives assembled on the battlefield to fight, Arjuna became overwhelmed with compassion. There is a key message in this section for all of us. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is willing to accept a menial position for the pleasure of his devotee. And he is not an autocratic ruler or an order supplier whose only job is to punish sinners or law violators. Rather, he engages in various loving exchanges with his dear devotees, and he descends in the material world to attract our hearts to his loving pastimes. And we can learn a very vital lesson from Arjuna. Despite the intensity of the situation, Arjuna took time to reflect. Life may be crammed with responsibilities and pressing issues, but attendance to such demands should not be at the expense of quality spiritual introspection. Unfortunately, the chronic disease of modern man is the excuse of no time when it comes to such soul searching. Arjuna, foreseeing the imminent suffering and death of his dear ones, which is an inevitable consequence of war, he begins to reflect on his decision to fight in the war. And verses 28 to 30 speaks about his bewilderment. At this stage, bereft of broader spiritual vision, his uncertainty intensifies and he becomes bewildered, which teaches us an important lesson. When one lacks an understanding of his spiritual identity, his relationship with God, and the critical purpose behind this world, one inevitably becomes disturbed and frustrated by life's challenges. Being disheartened and bewildered, Arjuna in verses 31 to 42 offers various reasons for disengaging from the battle. This section is titled as Turning Point, and Arjuna speaks as follows. My dear Lord, it would be cruel and heartless to prematurely terminate the lives of so many soldiers. Even an unrivaled kingdom would bring no happiness, since I would be bereft of the company of my near and dear ones. My dear Lord, I would surely accrue bad karma as a result of such brutal violence, where I'll be forced to kill my own relatives and my own seniors and my own teachers. The wholesale killing involved would destroy the family unit and social structure causing havoc for future generations, and I would be blamed for it. After speaking like this, Arjuna fell silent. His mind overwhelmed by grief, he puts his weapons aside and decides not to fight. Life means ups and downs, and we all face various challenges in our life. With some we can deal easily, while others may have the potential to overwhelm us. Arjuna was overwhelmed, and he could not decide what was best for him. Thus, out of frustration, he decided to quit. Often it is seen that when an individual is faced with an overwhelming situation, a common response to it is to quit. It means that although our situations could be different than that of Arjuna, but response is still the same. At the end of Bhagavad Gita, the situation for Arjuna did not change. His relatives and dear ones were still standing against him. However, his response changed. He became free from bewilderment and grief and eventually won the battle. Similarly, the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita can change our response to an overwhelming situation and help us win the battle of life. Do remember this, that we may not be faced with overwhelming situation now, but we can meet with such existential crisis at any time. How we deal with it determines where we end up, and how we conduct ourselves now determines how we deal with it then. This concludes the chapter 1. In the next episode, we'll discuss the second chapter, in which Lord Krishna refutes every argument given by Arjuna to quit and encourages him to see difficult situations not as a challenge but an opportunity to grow. Stay tuned for the next episode, and now it's time for trivia. You can share your answers and also any doubts in the comments, and we'll be happy to hear from you. Thank you.